You're welcome to my complete Java course. In today's video lecture, we are going to learn cloning. How to do a cloning in Java. Cloning in Java. What is cloning? So basically, the Java object cloning is a way to create exact copy of an object. For this purpose, clone method of object class is used to clone an object. The java.lang.clonable interface must be implemented by the class whose object clone we want to create. If we don't implement clonable interface, clone method generates clone not supported exception. The clone method is defined in the object class. Syntax of the clone method is as follows: protected object clone throws clone not supported exception. So this is the syntax of the clone methods. Why use clone method? So the clone method saves the extra processing task for creating the exact copy of an object. If we perform it by using the new keyword, it will take a lot of processing to be performed. That is why we use object clone. There are two types of cloning in Java. Number one, shallow cloning. Number two, deep cloning. Shallow copy in Java or shallow cloning in Java. The default version of clone method creates the shallow copy of an object. The shallow copy of an object will have exact copy of all the fields of original object. If original object has any reference to other object as fields, then only reference of those objects are copied into clone object. Copy of those objects are not created. That means any changes made to those objects through clone object will be reflected in original object or vice versa. Shallow copy is not 100% disjoint from original object. Shallow copy is not 100% independent of original object. Below is the example which create the shallow copy of an object student1. So let's I will explain I explain the shallow cloning with the example. Suppose there is a student1 object, and student1 object have the ID, name, and the course reference, and this course also the one object, and this course object has the math and English. So when you will go for the shallow cloning, so this ID field of student1 object is copied to the student2 object. This name of student1 object will be copied to the student2 object, but this is a reference type. This field is not the primitive type. This is a reference type. So if you are thinking that this the reference means the object of the course class will be copied into the student2 class, so it will be the wrong. Only the reference of the course class will be copied in the clone object. So this object always point to this object. So in the original object and the clone object, they are attached in the reference. So if you change the course in the clone object, it will reflect into the original object. If you change the field of the course in the original object, then it will reflect the course field into the clone object. So we can say the shallow cloning the two object or creating the object by using the shallow cloning they are not the disjoint, or they are not the independent. They are dependent on the reference field. Now we will go for the example. So here we create the course class, course, and in the course class we define a string type subject, and we create the constructor to initialize the subject. Okay, now we want to create the clone copy of the student class. So we know that if we want to do a clone of any class object, then that class must be implements clonable interface. So here we implement the clonable interface in the student class, and student class have a three property: student ID, student name, and course as a reference of the course class. And this is the constructor. In this constructor we initializing all these three fields, and in the student class we override the clone method. So this clone method comes from the clonable interface. So we are just returning the superclass clone method from a student class. Now we define a main method. Okay, and main methods we throws the clone not supported exception. Why? Because in the student class the clone method is throwing the clone not support exception. It is not handling by using the try catch block. It is throwing by using the throws clause. So if a method is throwing throwing the exception by using the throws clause, so its caller method should also be the throw the same exception. Okay, so now first we create a course class object. So here we create a course class object with passing the course name is math. Now we create a student object, student1 by id1, name is Ram, and course value. Now we create a student object by student1 dot clone. So here we are using the clone method for creating the student2 object, and we since clone method return type is the object type, so we need to do typecast here. So we will do typecast. Okay, now we are going to print the student1 dot course dot subject field and student2 course dot subject field. So if we print this subject field, these both object have the same field, same subject field, so the math will be print. But now if we change this subject field from math to science by using the student2 objects, and again we print the subject field by using the student1 and student2, now the field for student1 and student2 has changed math to science. But one point notice here, we change the course field by the help of only student2 object. Automatically this field is changed in the object student1 object. Why? Because the student1 object and student2 object are the connected on the reference of course object. If you change any name, if you do changes in the name by using the student2 object, it will not reflect in the student1 object, but it will reflect only the reference object. So the output will be, first it will print the math 2 times because of this statement, and then after the changing the subject it will print the science because of this statement. Okay, so let's I show you this example practically on Eclipse IDE. So, so I have just copied the code from the slides. So you can see course class here. In the course class, we define a subject class property. We create the constructor, define a student class, implements clonable interface, define the property, ID, name and course, define the constructor, define the clone method, and in the main method, we are creating the course object and creating the two object student1 object by using the new keyword, student2 object by the clone method, and try to print the subject of the student1 or student2. And again we change this in the subject math to science, and again we try to print the subject. So now if we run this program, we will get the output maths, science and science. Okay, now I would like to show you one thing. If we change the name by using the student 2 object, property student 2 dot name. Name okay, now here we are printing the student 1 name and student 2 name. Now if we run this program, let's see what happened. Ram because of this statement, because here student 1 and student 2 have the same name, but by using the student 2 we change the name property with the Sam. So now if we try to print the name property by using the student 1 and student 2, it will give the result Ram and Sam. So it is clear that if you define any property in the object and that properties as a copy into the clone object, but if you define any reference variable in the object, that object is not copied into the clone object. Only the reference of that object is passed to the clone object. That's why they are not disjoint at the level of object. Okay, so I hope now you understand what is the shallow cloning. Okay, so in the above example, student 1 is an object of student class which has three fields: ID, name and course. Course is a reference variable pointing to a course type object. Clone of student 1 is created by calling clone method on it and assigned it to student 2 as default version of clone method creates the shallow copy. The course field of both student 1 and student 2 will be pointing to same course object. So any changes made to this object through student 2 will be reflected in student 1 or vice versa. All these things we have learned or we have shown with the example. Now we are going to move further. Now we will discuss about the deep copy in Java or deep cloning in Java. Okay, so I think About the deep copy we will discuss in the next video, otherwise a video will be uh, more lengthy. So leave it for the today lecture, and in the next lecture we discuss about the deep copy in Java.